be very, very welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. And whilst I'm just moving to my presentation, thank you so much for having me be here with everyone. As an APLS myself as well, in a STEAM company. So yeah, really looking forward to sharing with everybody today. So yes, my name is Matt Pullen. I am the product marketing manager here at Jamf, educator of 22 years now, in higher education, primary school, secondary school, and now, yes, running kind of the education marketing side at Jamf. And in today's session, wanted to kind of talk about how we utilize the Jamf tools all the way from IT admin all the way through to the classroom. So as an APLS, I know I spoke to a lot of schools, a lot of teachers around their use of devices. And one of the things that really helped was giving teachers the confidence to use the devices in every single lesson to make sure students could achieve. And one of our main things that we talk about at Jamf is around empowering student success. We know that schools invest a lot of money into technology, and we know that the outcome really is that students do their very best with that technology at all times. So we want to make sure that whatever we provide our educators ultimately meets that goal of empowering that student success. And we do that in a few ways. One, through the setup of devices, and two, through that deployment to make sure that the right things are on the devices at the right time to meet the needs of those learners. Now, historically, lots of management tools out there are primarily designed for the IT department. And that does cause a little bit of a disconnect between the teachers in the classroom that are using the devices and the IT teams that sit behind the scenes to make sure that they're working. And we want to make sure that they are absolutely set up for that intended classroom use, because teachers want to have that experience, but they also have an awful lot of other things to do as well, and they can't always, fix the IT problems themselves. And students don't tend to sit still for that long for you to be able to get an IT person to come and help you. So the simplicity of what we do with the devices is really, really critical in this whole process. So we know that we want educators to have a little bit more autonomy and flexibility in what they do with the devices as well. One teacher who might be full of confidence might be happy enough to allow students to have a little bit of free rein on the devices, and feel confident in managing what students do on those devices. But another teacher might be new to using technology, and the fear alone of having technology in the classroom could be enough to put them off actually using that device. And then it takes away from the impact of what devices can do for our students. So we want to make sure that we really do meet this question head on. How do we prepare those devices to make sure we empower the learners and help them to learn anywhere and any time? And we know that students don't necessarily always learn within the classroom. Devices go home. How can we support them in that place as well? So we see this in three different ways from the Jamf ecosystem. The first thing is the most common thing. We deploy those devices, be that Mac, be that iPad, be that the Apple TVs, to make sure that everything works straight out of the box, minimizing that time that IT have to take to get things set up. We then make sure that we continue to manage those devices through those configurations and restrictions, etc., to make sure that the device is set up for exactly the purpose it was intended to be used for. And that includes things like making sure operating systems are updated, as well as the deployment of applications onto those devices. But the final thing, and the thing that I want to really focus on as part of today's session, is thinking about how we utilize the MDM framework in a creative way to support the classroom activity. And then equally, if those devices go home, how do we support those parents with the devices as well to make sure they're confident that students or their children, when they get to the home, are functionally using those devices to the best of its ability and not taking away from that whole experience. So let's take a look at the Jamf console that we have within Jamf School, which is our purpose-built tool specifically for education. It's a cloud-based MDM solution, so it allows IT admins to take control of those devices from anywhere. And within that dashboard, which is simplified for education use, you can track that device state. It's simple and easy to use. You can see the updated versions that are on all of your devices and check in for all of those app deployment. You can manage your locations of those devices, push out profiles and apps, and create policies for whatever you need to do. And we see this as being a simple solution because anybody within the education institution should be able to take management of these devices. So if you're a simple small school setup or one of the largest districts deploying devices, Jamf School's got you covered with the simplicity that you need to make sure that classroom experience is fruitless for the students to use. But if we just switch gears a little bit, let's talk about those other stakeholders that use the devices all the time and every day. We've got a tool for that called Jamf School Teacher. In Jamf School Teacher, we use this as a way to support that classroom delivery. Classroom management of those devices gives teachers the confidence to make sure that they're in control of what's taking place. Like we said, some teachers may be really confident using the technology, but how do we support those teachers that just don't have all the confidence in the world and fear that students potentially know more than they do about using technology? We don't want them to miss out on the opportunities that technology brings. So with the Jamf Teacher app, we allow teachers to be able to set up the devices to exactly the specifications that they need for their students to just focus on learning throughout the lesson, removing all the distractions that might be on the device to keep students just exactly where they need to be at the right time. And it comes with a companion app, the student version. In this, it empowers students to give them control over their own devices. Depending on what the top level IT admin allows, students can install pre-approved apps, books, or documents when they need them without the need of an Apple ID if the school haven't got them in place. It also allows them to be able to interact with teachers through messaging or simply just by raising their hand. Now, this is one of those things that's useful to talk about, but it's even better to see it in action. So I've got my two devices here. This is live. This is my teacher device and my student device on this side. And I'm going to show you how Jamf Teacher works between these two devices to give me as the teacher control of what the students can and cannot do on their device. So let's start by jumping into the Jamf Teacher app. Straight away, you can see in here, I'm already in a classroom, but if I go back one step, you'll see that you can have access to lots of different classes. So depending on the age and stage of your students, I might have all of my classes in here, depending on which type of teacher I am at that time. When I go into my class, you'll see that I have my list of students. Now, I will say I am at home at the moment, so I do not have a full class list of 30 students, but if I did, they'd all show up in this list here. On the right-hand side, I then have access to the things that I can do to their devices. So let's start with the restrictions section. If I go ahead and open up the restrictions tab, first of all, I get a timer. How long do I want these restrictions to be in place? It could just be a few minutes whilst I set up a lesson. It could be for the duration of the lesson, but I get the choice of that by choosing the timer on the side here. I can then choose which genres I want students to have access to. So quick and easy ways to turn off complete genres on the device. But for educators, the critical ones to look at are the ones in the device functionality. First, the camera. This is a fantastic tool for students to use in the classroom, but it can also be a little bit of a distraction. Students somewhat like to take selfies. And so if we give them access to the camera, teachers can fear that it's going to be a distraction in the lesson. But if I simply tap on the plus and then tap apply, I'm going to remove the camera from the student's device. Now you'll see on the screen something's disappeared. And now all of a sudden, there is no camera on the device. Now to show that, if I just simply tap to remove this again, the camera app will come back onto the device and students will have full access to it. So let's find the camera on the device in the bottom right-hand corner. Simple. teachers having that granular control of what they want to see on the device and what they want to remove for any given time. Let's go back into those restrictions and look at one other restriction which is really helpful for teachers. Being able to turn off or on spell check and autocorrect is a great tool for teachers that want to focus on literacy. Now, spell check and autocorrect are a fantastic accessibility tool when you need it to be an accessibility tool. But if I'm actually teaching children around spelling, then turning off spell check and autocorrect keeps the focus on exactly what I want the students to do. And again, I simply just need to tap on it to choose it and then apply that setting to the device. Now, the next one we'll look at is to allow specific apps. This student device is full of applications, mostly educational, but there are some on there that are potentially even more of a distraction than others. But even with this education-focused iPad, it may take students a little bit of time to find the applications that I want them to use, but it may also be that there's so much in there that could be a distraction to those students at any given time. So if I go into allowed apps, again, I can choose the length of time I want to set this restriction for, and then I can choose the apps that are going to be functional for that student in this lesson. So let's just choose a few on here now to get them focused. And then I tap apply, and that sends the command over to the student device, and those apps disappear from the screen. So now the students just have access to the applications that I feel are beneficial to the student, but no other applications on that device that may be a distraction. Now, at any point, I can see exactly how long I've got left on that restriction. I see the timer alongside where it says allowed apps, and I see the allowed apps that I have for the students. If a student wants to have an additional app at any time, I can easily just tap the plus, choose an additional app, tap apply, and it's going to add that additional app to their device instantly. Because the apps are technically always on their device, they're just hidden from students' views, so they can't go into them by accident. Now, that's a really, really quick and easy way for teachers to make sure that students aren't going to be focused on something that isn't the priority for the lesson. So that teacher who lacks that confidence can now have confidence to know that the students can only use the device for its intended purpose. And again, if I can wait for the timer to run out, or I can simply clear all the limitations on the device, and it will bring the student device back to its full mode with all of the apps available. The last one to have a look at here works in the same way. This is to allow specific websites. Now, one thing to say here, this is not content filtering. It's more about allowing students to just have access to the websites that I want them to for a specific piece of learning. Let's go ahead and just type in a couple of websites on here. Just ones I can easily quickly type for a demo. And again, I'm going to apply this. Now, because I haven't given them access to any other applications, it's automatically going to give them the Safari app because they need that in order to browse the internet. And it's going to push across those websites as well. So now on the student device, when they go to the Apple website, it will work and it will load up. If they go to any other website, namely the National Geographic website, it's going to block them from access because I don't want them to be searching around the internet for any content. This is about focused student learning. If I tap on the plus at the top of the screen, you'll see that it's also added those websites that I want students to use directly into the favorites bar. So the students always have access to the content I want them to look at. Now, like I said, it's not necessarily content filtering, although it does stop you accessing other things. Content filtering would still be a top-level IT admin control. This is more about focused use of the internet for learning in the classroom. And again, at any point, I can add additional websites, or I can remove access to specific websites if students are not getting the best out of the use of the tools. So let's go ahead and clear all of those limitations. Now, for me as an educator, that feels really simple and easy to use. But I've been using technology for about 10 years as part of my teaching career. So what does this do for teachers that lack a little bit of confidence? Well, let's say we can go into lesson templates, and I can create a lesson template here, which has all of the content that I wanted to add in. Let's say we're going to do a lesson on space. I simply give it a name. And then within this, I can choose to add all of those restrictions, the apps, and the websites that I want them to use for that lesson. I've already created one here for creative literacy with a range of websites, range of apps, and my restrictions already in place. And now, when I'm in my lesson, all I need to do is tap on this icon along the top, choose how long I want it to be set for, and choose my lesson template. When I now tap apply, it sets all of that across to the student device with all of the apps in place. And if they go to Safari and choose the plus, all of those websites are there for them to use at any point that they need to use them in that lesson. I can add or remove any apps or restrictions at any point in the lesson. And when the timer runs out, the device will go back to its full operating mode. So again, for teachers with a lack of confidence, it's about 2 taps that they need to do to get a device set up for exactly what they want the students to use it for. Once they've done this, this is a great time for them to then move into something like Apple Classroom to be able to monitor the ongoing progress of the student in the class, be able to see their screens and offer verbal and feedback based on the work they're doing on their devices as well. Now let's just go ahead and just clear those again. And you'll see how quickly all of those apps come back onto the screen. Students have full access. Now that's the teacher side of things. What about the student side? Well, if I go into the student app, you'll see this is a similar view to what the teacher has, but they have specific access to very specific things. Where you can see the scrolling apps on the screen, this is the self-service app store that's been created for these students specifically. If I go into any one of these tabs, I can create a specific list of applications, documents, or profiles that students have access to on their device to download at any given time. Now, apps stands to reason. This is a great place to give them access to additional apps that you might not want on their device at all times. But to be able to provide documents as well means you could give students access to sports timetables or music timetables or calendars for the whole year, and they can have access to it on their device in a place where they know they can easily find it. Those lesson links that I shared before are also available for the students. So they have another place where they can easily find the content for the lesson. But then there are some additional things in here. Students have the ability to be able to message the teacher as well. So just by simply using the text chat, students and teachers can have a two-way conversation. Now, at this point, the teacher's turned off the ability for students to reply. When I start to type a new message into this group, let's say I'm going to send it to Daryl, I give the option here to allow replies or to turn it off. So again, teachers having that control to say, yes, you can reply, or is this just an information giving message that I want to give to the students? So again, simple and easy ways for students to be able to engage with their teachers. Now, let's go back into the classroom and think about some additional things that we want to do. Because this utilizes Wi-Fi in order to operate, students don't necessarily need to be in the same space as you. So where schools are starting to think about transforming their learning spaces, students may be utilizing different parts of the school in order to do their work. So how do I get their attention to come back to me if they are working in a library or outside? Along the top, I have a space where I can choose an attention screen, and I can give a very specific message in here. So let's say we're going to ask them to please return to class. I can tap apply. That again is going to send that message across to the student device, and it's going to lock the student device so the student can't actually use it. As well as locking the device, it puts that message on the device. So if students are working away from the teacher at any moment, I've given them that instruction to come back to the class. Now, it could be return to class. It could be something like the next instruction in the lesson. It could just be, we're not going to be using iPads for the next few minutes. But we've personalized it to our students to be able to give them access to that device. And again, I can wait for the timer to run out, or I can just simply remove that restriction on the device. So that's it from Jamf Teacher. Very, very simple and easy to use. There are another couple of things to just highlight in here, though, from a teacher point of view, that we find very useful. Let's imagine that as a teacher, I've been searching around the App Store and I find some apps that I think are going to be really, really useful. Let's imagine this Draw It app is something which I think would be very good for my students to use as part of their learning. I can tap on the share icon at the top and it gives me the option to share this to Jamf Teacher. When I tap on that, it asks me where I want this app to go. So let's say I want to share this with my students in this class. And I can share it to all students or just some select students. We'll say we'll select all. And then I tap Submit. And at this point, it gives me a reason for my request, because what it's doing behind the scenes is it's going to send this request to the IT admin who's in charge of Jamf School. So rather than having a separate process to be able to request applications, we've wrapped it all up in one place. We're asking the IT admins for the app. We've already told them which devices we wanted to deploy it to, and we've really simplified that process. So now I just say it's going to be good for maths. I would suggest probably putting more of a reason in than that, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to add that in. That's now sending that app request across to my IT admin. And if I go back to my teacher app, I can see access to all of these things in my app request section, and I can see the process of this request. So the teacher at all times stays connected to what's happening. As the teacher, as the IT admin gets that request to come through, they can either deny it or they can allow it, and I will get information to tell me what state everything is in terms of my new app request for my students. So again, simple, clean, and easy way to help manage those devices in the classroom. Now, we talked a little bit about Apple Classroom before. Apple Classroom and Jamf Teacher work brilliantly well together. Both of them are available for Mac and iPad. They both allow students to be able to have control of their devices and teachers to be able to take control. But there are some differences in terms of what they do to complement each other. With Jamf Teacher, we can have multi-app lock. In Apple Classroom, you have single app lock. Now, this is a great example to showcase why these work well together. For the majority of the lesson, I may want students to have access to a range of tools, but there may be parts of the lesson where I really need them to focus on a specific thing. I may even be setting a small test where they can only use one specific app. At that point, Apple Classroom can lock them into just the one app that I want them to use. There are other things that you can do as well. Being able to message the student, being able to have that attention screen with a message. It's a really great place to make sure that we get set up in our classroom. And then Apple Classroom can take over to help us manage the rest of the lesson to make sure students are on track and give them that feedback as we mentioned before. Now, one other thing that's really good, we can use Jamf Teacher to help us set up things like creating photos for students. A small thing, but something that matters quite a lot to students in the classroom is how they're represented on the screen. Now, usually in Apple Classroom, you'll need your IT admins to make sure all of those photos are set up. However, in Jamf Teacher, we can do that for them. So if I go back to my class and I go to Daryl, for example, if I tap and hold on his name, you'll see it comes up with the option to choose photos or take photos. Now, it's a tiny little thing, but if students want to be represented in a way that works for them, being able to share a photo with you as a teacher, or a drawing, or an emoji, or however they want to be represented, allows the teacher to easily update that on their device. Oh, And one more thing when it comes to working with Apple Classroom and Jamf Teacher. You'll notice on here I have my managed classes that have been created through Apple School Manager and in Jamf School. But I also have the option to create a new class. Now, this can be really, really powerful when I want a specific bespoke class to be set up that isn't based on something we do in timetabled lessons. Here, I can just simply give the class a name. Let's just call it Sport. It's going to be a lunchtime club. Tap Create. It creates a class, gives me the option to add students. On the student screen, I tap on my name, I tap on Join Class, and I type in that code. And now I've joined the class. When I tap Done, I now have that student within my class, and I can do all of those same things. Not only that, but it will also copy all of that content over to Apple Classroom, and all of that content will be available in Apple Classroom as well. So it uses the back end of the MDM to make sure that those student devices are all set up at all times. Now, one final thing to look at, and that's Jamf Parent. Now, when those devices go home, we also want to give parents that same level of access to their devices. So if I jump into our demo again here, I'm now in the Jamf Parent tool. In Jamf Parent, I have access to my child's device. And in my child's device, I have those same functions that we just saw within within Jamf Teacher. I can choose the apps that I want my child to have access to and the length of time I want them to have access to those. Again, when I set this as a lock, it will put this on the device to limit them to only the applications that I want them to use for that time, giving parents that same control and power to make sure devices are used for what their intended purpose is at any given time. Now, moving on from that, we talked briefly about content filtering. Jamf Safe Internet is our content filtering and network threat prevention tool, which allows our students to learn fearlessly. By simply having block access to harmful or inappropriate content, we can make sure that students can use the device regardless of location and make sure that they're safe whilst they're using it. It also utilizes network threat prevention to make sure that we have secure devices, meaning phishing, malware, etc. attacks are going to be blocked straight away. Now, we think this is a really powerful tool to help students feel comfortable and confident using those devices going forward. So I'm conscious of time, and I want to make sure that I leave some time for some questions at the end. But I want to finish by just talking about a few next steps that are available to you. We have a Jamf Educator domain, which enables teachers or IT admins to utilize a virtual system of Jamf Teacher, which means you don't have to have Jamf Teacher set up for you to be able to understand how to use it. This is a great way to get people familiar with the different settings and to play around with the different things that you can do without having to actually take over the control of a student device. We've also got in there some additional materials to help you keep developing your role of using that technology. And we're really happy to share this with everybody. This is free to use. You do need to sign up because it will give you a certificate at the end. But once you're in, we hope to build that community going forward of educators sharing best practices of how they utilize the tools to empower their students. And with that, I will open up for any questions that there may be. You just jump to our questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Matt, for everything that you have explained us. I believe Jamf and Jamf Teacher specifically, those are great tools that are going to be like great allies to the school. So yes, we have questions. We have one that says, can students send messages to students? ¿Pueden
They can't.
mandar mensajes a otros alumnos?
Yeah, they can't send messages direct to students. If I send a message to a group of students, then they could respond as part of a group, but the teacher would have to be in the group. They don't have the ability to send it directly to each other without the teacher being present. So group-based or teacher direct to one student.
That is great. And another question says, does Jamf work also with Apple Schoolwork?
So yes, so Jamf will help you get Apple Schoolwork set up. Obviously, Apple Schoolwork works more with the Apple School Manager setup, and it will be in there. But if you're utilizing Jamf Teacher, it will still allow you to say, yes, you can have Apple Schoolwork on the screen or not, etc., and give those delays and functions that you might need to use. So yes.
Great. Another question, and I think this is the last one, says, is this a paid feature? So is Jamf Teacher a paid feature?
So this is a great question, and no, this is not a paid feature. This is part of Jamf School and also in Jamf Pro. There are some differences with Jamf Pro because Jamf School is our education-focused tool, but everything I've shown you within the demo today works across both Jamf School and Jamf Pro. The only difference being the Jamf Student app doesn't work with Jamf Pro because we have self-service, which is part of Jamf Pro. So there's still the option for students to download apps, but it doesn't have the same kind of communication functions. But no, it is a value-added feature. We don't call it free. It's value-added. It's part of what you pay for. I can't hear you, Amanda.
Incluye, no es un costo adicional que tenga el poder usar Jamf Teacher o Jamf Student. Entonces, perdón, o Jamf Parent. Entonces, pues sí, adelante. De hecho, les invitamos a muchos de nuestros clientes y clientes de otros canales a que aprovechen las funciones de Jamf Teacher y Jamf Parent, porque es un gran, una gran herramienta. Matt, there is another question says, how do you register as a school? So I'm guessing they are talking about Jamf Educator. Can you explain us that?
Yeah, so Jamf Educator, if you go to the link that we can share out, you just create a free account. I always recommend using a personal account for this, just in case you move schools and you lose access to those things. But just register and go in. It's a self-paced learning, similar to Apple Teacher. If you've utilized Apple Teacher, self-paced learning, you can go through the different lessons, and then after I think 5 lessons, there's a small quiz, and then you get a Jamf Educator badge. So.
Sí, exactamente, como Apple Teacher. De hecho, yo pude certificarme por medio de Jamf Educator y lo hice quizás en un par de horas, si ya conoces la herramienta. Si no la conoces, es también una muy buena oportunidad para ir haciendo los ejercicios a la par e ir aprendiendo. Y si tu pregunta es, Carola, si como escuela quieren empezar a usar Jamf, puedes ponerte en contacto con tu canal favorito. Es decir, EXA, Vinacorp, Focus, todos los que estamos aquí representados, podemos ayudarte a obtener Jamf, toda la herramienta. Okay, I think those are all the questions. So thank you so much, Matt, for your time. Thank you for everything that you have explained us and showed us and showcased us. Sometimes Jamf or the MDM kind of scares us because it's like very technical, but you've made it very, very clear. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Oh, we have a couple more questions, if you don't mind. It says, we have started using Jamf this year. We have a BYOD program, and we have encountered issues such as students uninstalling Jamf. Can this be prevented?
Yeah, to my knowledge, as long as you've deployed the Jamf student app through the MDM so that you're licensing it to the students as opposed to them downloading the application, you will be able to set it so that they cannot remove the application. Now, because it's a BYO device, you can't do that for their personally owned apps. So the app has to be deployed to them through Jamf School. Once it's done that way, they won't be able to remove managed applications, but obviously they still have complete control over their own devices.
Thank you. Y para complementar, para los nuevos dispositivos, los que apenas acaban de llegar y los integran al MDM, hay un periodo de gracia que les animo a que se contacten con los canales y con el área de sistemas. Imaginémonos 30, 60 días, no recuerdo exactamente, por eso les digo, comuníquense con el área, en el que sí es posible eliminar el perfil, pero pasado ese tiempo se bloquea, entonces ya puedes prevenir que suceda esa situación. Okay, last question. How do licensing this tool? How to license this tool?
If that's about Jamf Teacher, so that's a setting within Jamf School or Jamf Pro that you just allow access to it, and there will be additional settings and restrictions to the level of access you want teachers to have. So the demo I gave you, I showed you all the access, but you can say that teachers can't allow websites. You can switch that off. You can say that they can't change functions. So within Jamf School in the main portal, it gets turned on. You just need to obviously deploy the apps to the teacher and the students, and teachers have to have a login in order to do it. Students don't. Theirs is automatically through Jamf School, but the teachers have to log into it to have a managed ability to be able to take control of student devices, because we don't want students controlling student devices. So that's why we do it with accounts for teachers.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Muy bien. Pues cualquier duda adicional que vaya saliendo de cómo adquirir Jamf o cómo administrarlo, siéntanse libres, por favor, de contactarnos. Ok, una última cosa, si no lo han hecho aún, por favor, ayúdenos a evaluar la sesión del día de hoy. Vamos a meterle un poco de velocidad para ir a las siguientes sesiones. Recuerden que van a ser grabadas, entonces si de repente se perdieron un poquito de minutos, no se preocupen tanto. Pero bueno, muchísimas, muchísimas gracias a todos los asistentes. Thank you so much, Matt, once again, and hope to have you back next year, maybe.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Gracias y nos vemos en las siguientes sesiones. Bye bye.